We're very pleased to have R. Chandrashekhar, President of NASSCOM, joining us live on the show to understand how meaningful that visit was, what were some of the key messages that were communicated, and hopefully what it yields. Mr. Chandrashekhar, many thanks for your time here on NDTV Profit. You know, we were talking a little bit earlier about the travel ban. We also visited the comments by IT Minister today saying that the issues around H-1B visas have been communicated to the United States. But I want to ask you, how did your mission or delegation to the United States play out?
Well, Manvi, during the visit, I think our main objective was to clear up a number of misperceptions which exist with regard to the H-1B visa program and the kind of work that the industry does and the impact on the U.S. economy and U.S. jobs. Our goal was to meet with both lawmakers who are concerned with the legislation and people in the administration who are concerned with both the regulation as well as assisting in the executive orders, if any, which are issued. So during our visit, we met with some of the key legislators, including Representative Issa and Representative Lofgren, who, as you know, had tabled bills. Earlier, before our visit to the U.S. in India, we had met with the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Goodlatte, and we had also met with Representative Holding, who is the chairman of the India Caucus. In the U.S., apart from both Representative Issa and Lofgren, we met with governors of about 25 states at an event where they were all invited by the ambassador. And we also met with a lot of senior advisors to other representatives. To all of them, I think our main message was the following. Number one, there is a misperception that this industry takes away jobs from the U.S. The reality is that this industry creates jobs in the U.S. Itself, directly and indirectly. And more importantly, it actually enables the creation of jobs by all of corporate America by providing them services which enable them to adopt technology, become more efficient and competitive, and continue to create jobs. The second is that this industry provides technical skilled workers who are in short supply in the U.S. All the U.S. government data indicates that there is a shortage, and therefore there is really no redundancy which is being brought in, leading to any apprehensions of qualified Americans being deprived of a job. The third point is that if at all, in spite of all of these factors, it is considered necessary to provide protection for qualified American workers, we have no problem with that given the the background that I have indicated. But any such protective measures or restrictions with regard to the H-1B visa should be made applicable to all companies so that the protection is fully available to any American worker. The current situation is that many of the proposals are applicable only to Indian companies in effect, even though they are not named as such, but the provisions are carved out in such a way that they apply only to Indian companies who actually account for only 20% of the visas. Okay. So protective measures which are made applicable only to 20% of the visa users and not applicable to the rest of the 80% really does not provide protection. So all that we are saying is if there are any such measures contemplated, it should be made applicable to all. So these are the central messages that we conveyed to all the lawmakers, and I think that they were quite receptive. They understood what we were saying and said, well, okay, if these are the ideas, you can share your ideas on how legislation can be drafted so that American workers are protected and simultaneously whatever are the needs of the industry are met. So I think on that front, the interactions were good and they were receptive.
Okay.
Although, of course, the actual legislation, I think, is some distance away because there are many other issues which will need to be addressed, like illegal immigrants, undocumented people, border wall, etc. So legislation is not imminent and is unlikely anytime soon, although many bills will get tabled.
Okay.
The second part is about the people in the administration, and we met people in the administration. Yeah.
Okay, tell us, how it went with the administration. Then I'll ask my next question.
Okay. So as far as the administration is concerned, we met with senior representatives in the Department of Homeland Security, which, as you know, is responsible for immigration and related issues. We met with people from the US TR, the trade representative, and we met with representatives from the White House as well, senior representatives from the White House. And again, the same messages were conveyed, but in the context of executive orders and tighter regulation. I think what we are picking up there is that a tighter implementation of the law and regulation, a more stringent oversight is something which is certainly on the cards. And on that, frankly, we don't have any issue because all the major Indian companies have been fully compliant with the law. They remain compliant with the law and will absolutely, remain compliant in the future also. So as long as these inspections and scrutiny is done within reasonable limits and does not become over frequent or interfere in the operations, there is no issue with regard to a more stringent oversight. The other aspect is that there could be other provisions of greater scrutiny at the application stage, and once again that could lead to certain delays in the issue of visas and so on. So net this does create some procedural issues, but as long as it does not seriously hamper the operations of business, I think that does not pose challenges to the industry, although our primary suggestion to them was that the ease of doing business should not be adversely impacted. So that is something which I think we will have to wait and see the exact form of any of these regulations and what impact they have, and then we can respond to them.
But you've between the time
that's the overall picture.
Okay. Between the time your delegation was in the US to our conversation today, what's happened is that the US has temporarily suspended the expedited premium processing of H-1B visas. Now, this expedited premium processing essentially meant that you could get your visas, H-1B visas, in a couple of weeks, as opposed to 3 to 6 months. And that's one example of a procedural delay that could hurt Indian IT companies. Reflect on the impact there.
You see, I think, let me put a sense of proportion on this issue. It is not uncommon, and it has not been uncommon in the past, for the US to temporarily suspend the processing of the priority visas in the first few months of the year, because April 1st every year, a new set of the new cycle kicks in, and new applications are received, and the quota of 65,000 plus 20,000 is reckoned from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. So since the rush of applications comes in April, in order to use the available administrative capacity to process them, the priority processing has in the past also been suspended. But having said that, I think what is new this time is that the period of suspension that has been indicated is much longer. It is 6 months, whereas earlier the period was much shorter. Secondly, it is applicable to a wider extent. It's applicable to transfers. It is applicable to extensions also. And therefore, we will continue to work with the US Embassy in India to try and see that this has minimal impact on the industry. We definitely, see that this would cause a little bit of inconvenience to the industry. It's not a showstopper or something which is a huge detriment to the industry, but it does cause delays. It does necessitate a greater extent of planning, because now the regular processing can take anything from 3 months to 6 months, and therefore, companies will have to plan much ahead, and that's not always possible. So these kind of inconveniences would be there, and we do hope that this will, as soon as possible, that it will be restored, as has been the practice in earlier years as well.
But the worriers, and there are, a fair number of worriers, they're saying that, for example, this, expedited premium processing of H-1B visas, the suspension for 6 months, is this a prelude to, a much broader overhaul of the visa system? And yes, Mr. Chandrashekhar, you've acknowledged that you're watching that. There is a chance of that happening. You've talked about the messages that have gone from the Indian side to the, legislators, to the administration, to Homeland Security. I'm asking you a slightly unfair question. If the worst case plays out, what options do Indian companies have? And I ask this because we seem to see tech companies moving quite fast in terms of acquisitions in the US. Would you say and agree that this is a strategic response to this visa overhang?
Well, I think first and foremost, I hope you are not excluding me from the list of people who worry. And I think we do have our own concerns, because I think overall the mood there certainly is in the direction of protection, is in the direction of anti-globalization. That is clearly something which is visible. And we have to see how it translates in terms of actual policy. So I think, clearly some changes are in the offing, some in the near term through executive orders or regulatory changes, changes in terms of regulatory implementation, and in the longer term through the legislative route. And all of these changes are likely to make things more difficult. It's difficult to envisage that some of them will actually make it easier or enhance the window. So, given that that is the prevailing sentiment, notwithstanding the facts and notwithstanding all of the data and information that is before them, industry also has to prepare, and there are at least 3 different levels at which that preparation is required. Number one, while they are fully compliant with the law, to ensure that all the documentation is maintained in appropriate manner, that they are ready and available for inspection, so that in terms of record keeping, deficiencies are not noticed or observed. The second is, as you have implied, going the acquisition route, so that companies have a bigger mix of visa workers and domestic workers, because presumably many of the acquired companies would actually have largely or only American nationals as their employees, and that would help in altering the ratio, which is currently one of the criteria by which these restrictive provisions kick in. And the third is to continue to do what they have been doing, which is to try and hire more qualified Americans, although there have been major challenges on that account because of the lack of qualified people, and the fact that even in the universities in the US, 75% of the enrollment in the universities in the STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, are actually international students, foreigners. And even to hire them, you still need a visa. So there are huge and genuine challenges on the ground in terms of hiring locally. But that's the third part of the plank which companies will have to continue to their efforts to do that. So those are the three things which companies will need to do. Having said that, if restrictive measures are brought in and the qualified people are not available locally, then eventually only two things can happen. Either the job simply remains undone or the job gets shipped overseas and gets offshored, both of which are not desirable even from an American point of view as far as we understand. So we have to wait and see how all this plays out. And I would say that we do have concerns and we are watching the situation very closely. Both the industry and government of India have shared our deep concerns to the relevant US authorities. We have shared our views even with the media in the US who also were interested in all the different aspects of this issue. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. We have also emphasized that this is an important sector and it is critical for building up the India-US relationship. Both countries have agreed that the India-US bilateral relationship is important to them and that we need to grow it from the current $100 billion of trade to as much as $500 billion. But clearly, that is going to be a challenge if one of the most important sectors is constrained and constricted by all of these artificial restrictions. So I think whether you look at the strategic level or you look at the sector level, this is something which, the US also needs to consider all the aspects and take a open-minded, far-sighted and a pragmatic view, which is in their interest as well as India's interest.
What is the next big marker that you're going to be tracking which indicates how things are playing out? You said we're going to have to watch. So what are you watching next?
As I said, the more imminent risks or danger lies in executive orders. But what can be done through executive orders is very limited given the way that the US system works. Most of the substantive issues, whether it is the number of visas or the mechanism and method for allotting the visas, are all governed by the law. So the executive orders will mostly be with regard to how the rules will be implemented, the oversight mechanism and so on. So those are the more imminent challenges, and that is something which we will be keeping an eye out for and continuing to work with the US authorities on that front. The bigger problem could be, I'm not saying it would be, but it could be on the legislative front, but that is not imminent. It's a long way off because when the question of legislation comes up, then we must understand that H-1B visas is not at all the topmost priority. The bigger priorities are, illegal immigrants, undocumented residents in the US, the border wall, and unskilled immigration into the US. So those are all the highest priority for the current dispensation. And even in terms of volume, they are a much, much bigger problem. There are several million undocumented people in the US. Therefore, this issue is really a very peripheral issue when you look at the larger immigration concerns that the US has. And therefore, when these are addressed comprehensively, and that also seems to be the most likely scenario, that all of these will be addressed through a more comprehensive effort, that will take some doing because there are political challenges as well. But the major changes will come through that route, and that is something which we will have to track.
Okay.
But the immediate concern as far as the legislation is concerned is a spate of bills which are setting the atmospherics. And I think it is therefore absolutely critical for us to engage and ensure that the atmospherics are not set based on emotion alone and contrary to all the facts, data and logic of the situation.
Fair enough. I'm going to leave it at that. R. Chandrashekhar, President of NASSCOM, many thanks for your time here on NDTV.
Okay.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. And thanks for running us through what the NASSCOM delegation, has communicated during its visit to the United States. Many thanks, sir.